You are now tuned into the truth frequency.
We are TFR. TFR.
Truth Frequency Radio.
This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill. The story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
You're listening to the Revolutionary Radio Project with your host, Rob Skiba.
All I'm offering is the truth.
Hello and welcome to the Revolutionary Radio Project. I am your host, Rob Skiba, and tonight I'm going to be talking with David and Donna Carrico. And I first heard about David on a roundtable discussion that I was on that included David, Gary Wayne, myself, and I can't remember if anybody else was on that call also, but it was hosted by John Pounders regarding the conference coming up in Evansville that's going to be in May, actually, next month. And so I thought, you know what, it'd be good to get them on the show tonight, talk about some of the things that they're going to be talking about at the conference and other things that they've done. And so David and Donna have been ministering as followers of Jesus Christ, a counter-cult ministry, since 1984. Together, they have researched and written 19 books, such as The Great Seal of the United States of America, its occult meaning, history, and information on the Illuminati. The Egyptian Masonic Satanic Connection, which explains the connections of the groups and exposes the Blue House case in Evansville, Indiana, with pictures drawn by several survivors of satanic ritual abuse. Christian Workers Handbook, the guide for ministry to Masons, 33 points directly from Masonic authorities compared to the King James Version of the Bible verses. College Fraternities, the secret society on campus, reveals the connections and rituals in that regard. Victims to Victors, through the cross of Jesus Christ, healing workbook that helps anyone to get the garbage out of their lives and to be set free in Jesus. It also has some sections on casting out devils, Disassociative Identity Disorder, MPD, and some of Donna's poems. Another book, The Luciferian Transmutation, and also a contributing chapter in The Dark Side of Freemasonry compiled by Ed Decker, which is now also in an ebook format. They also have other books and resources including CDs, DVDs, and various tracks. David is a sought-after seminar speaker and guest on many radio programs, including Christian, secular, internet, and shortwave. He is an avid Bible scholar and loves to share the Word of God, exposing the connections of current events with Bible prophecy. Donna also shares her testimony of how God has brought her from a victim to a victor after she accepted Jesus as her Lord and Savior. She has been a guest speaker at the criminal justice class at Indiana University and women's AGLO groups and other ritual abuse conferences. Donna has also written 2 books, Lord, Is That You? A Garden of Memoirs and Blessings, the result of a command from God and more than 27 years of Bible study notes, prophecies, words of knowledge, poems, songs, and ministry stories. Her other book, While You Wait, Short Stories and Poems to Occupy Your Mind, a collection of mostly fictional stories and poems with Christian morals. Her self-written testimony was accepted in a book called Trials and Triumphs, sold at Amazon and other book distributors. Their ministry believes in and practices Isaiah 58:1, which says, "Cry aloud, spare not, lift up thy voice like a trumpet, and show my people their transgression, and the house of Jacob their sins." Both David and Donna are in their middle 60s, and they offer personal ministry to survivors of various types of abuse through their resources, phone, and email. On their website, they have an archive page with many of their Bible teachings and also their online Bible school info and tests, totally free with a simple sign-up. Over 2 years ago, they started Followers of Jesus Christ Internet Radio and YouTube channel to reach the whole world. Currently, they conduct a local Bible study in their apartment complex and offer internet radio 24/7 with David's Bible studies, several music hours, and Donna's Ritual Abuse and Healing Hour, along with other music and promos. They have live church on Sunday mornings from 9 to 10 a.m. Central Time, and that's on their website, FOJCradio.com. So without further delay, I'm going to go ahead and bring them on. Are you guys there, David and Donna?
We are here, Rob. Glad to be with you tonight.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. That's quite a bio you have there.
Boy, that wore me out just listening to it.
Yeah, the longer you've been around in ministry, the longer your bio gets, I guess, right?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I've many times I've seen the buffalo go south, no doubt about it.
All right, well, why don't you both share a little bit more about your testimony as to how you came into all that stuff that I just read? When did you come to know the Lord, and how did you initially get involved in ministry?
Well, I was a hippie, a flower child of the 60s, and back in those days, they put you in jail for smoking marijuana. And I became a Christian in Indiana State Prison in 1972. And when I got out, in 1980, I married my wife Donna, and we moved to Evansville, and we began doing AM radio, and we would talk about things like Bible prophecy, the door knocker cults, and cutting edge issues for the day. And along came a fellow by the name of Colonel Tom McKinney, and he had written a book called The Deadly Deception. And at that time, I was in the Church of God of Cleveland, Tennessee, in my early Christian life, conservative Pentecostal denomination. And when I went to join the church, there was a thing there that says, are you a member of a secret society? And if you were, you couldn't join. And well, I said no, I had no idea really what they were. So I knew that there was something there that wasn't right, but what on earth, I had no idea. But Tom McKinney is such a, you'd call him a down-home person, good old down-home Kentucky boy. And he was just so plain-spoken and non-sensational, yet the things he said were so sensational that it just absolutely floored me. And he has that kind of persona that you just don't think that this guy could lie to you, and he wasn't. But yet the material was so sensational that I couldn't believe that all of this existed without, me somehow at least having a clue about it. But I found out that I didn't, and that launched me into a head-over-heels research into Freemasonry, which I believe was definitely at the prompting of the Lord. And we wound up being involved in the National Leadership Conference on Ministry to Masons, and we gave a presentation there for over a dozen years, working with other ministries around the country. A lot of really good people, Stephen Sakalis, Dave Hunt, Gary Kahn, a lot of really good people. Ephesians 5:11 in Indianapolis, Ed Decker and Bill Schneblin, and just a lot of really good folks we had an opportunity to work with. And my wife, about the time that I was learning about Freemasonry, my wife was an advocate for children in a group called SLAM. It was an acronym for Society's League Against Molestation. And there were children there that a lot of them were sexually abused, and then it began to be disclosed, and this was through friends of ours, Rick Doniger, who also wrote a book wrote a chapter in the Egyptian Masonic Satanic Connection book, which was a result of the involvement in the Blue House episode. But these children began to disclose satanic ritual abuse. And as it began to evolve, before it was all over, there were 12 children that were making the claim that they were being taken out of public school to what they called a Blue House. And these 12 children did not know one another. The families did not know one another. They were from various schools, and they were all telling the same story of being taken to the same place. They were naming the same perpetrators, and the whole thing was just really quite amazing. And as I began to hear this, I was kind of, you have to have some honest skepticism when you hear stories like this. And one night, we got a phone call from one of the families, and this child had went out to like a carnival and saw someone there that triggered her into abreactions, and she was triggered into what we might call just a terror, an abreaction. She was just in a panic, and not only was it a physical panic, we arrived at her home at about midnight, and the child was about an 8-year-old girl, and she was laying there. She had a fever, and she was laying on her stomach, and on her back, it's like sometimes when you have a Charlie horse that you can actually, you can watch your muscle twitch. Well, this child in the middle of her back was having Charlie horses where people don't have muscles. I'd never seen anything like this. And we and other people, we began to pray and intercede and call upon the Lord. And after about a half an hour, the Lord delivered her of her fever and of her abreactions, and she was ready to go get ice cream. But that encounter there made me a believer. I knew at that point that we were not only confronting something that was evil in the physical realm, but we were confronting a supernatural evil. And as the case went on, there was a lady that was a professor of psychology at the University of Southern Indiana, and her name was Sue Donaldson, and she examined the children and said that all of them had been marked with a similar cut on their arm. And this is something I come to find out in what I call Masonic Satanism, which is a term I use. It comes basically from Aleister Crowley, who based his satanic philosophy on Freemasonry. Crowley basically said that all Freemasonry was sexual in its symbolism and its interpretation. And basically he said, well, we're just going to skip the symbol and we're going to develop the actual ritual. And he became involved in groups like the Astrum Argentinum, the Golden Dawn, and the Ordo Templi Orientis. And it's just what I call Masonic Satanism. And in what they would do, if any time that someone would say, I want a glass of water, I want to do something, they would cut them on the arm, and this would be something that would destroy the personality and force the person to become a member of the hive mentality. And it was also a lot of times a source of branding. And also the former prosecutor in Evansville, Bill Welburn, he became involved, and he was so convinced with the truth of what the children were saying, he devoted hours and hours of free legal time. He became a real advocate for the children, as did Rick Doniger and his wife. And as it turned out, I would like to say that everything turned out good, justice was done, but it just wasn't the case. Bill Welburn wound up dead. They found him in his bedroom with a gunshot in his head. Rick wound up going to jail, and the children and the families, for the most part, their lives were horrifically destroyed. There were suicides, and justice just was not done in the earthly realm. And that's one of the reasons why I believe that there's so much renewed interest in the Blue House story. It's just been amazing. Looking back on it now, the situation that we saw there, it's been repeated in a lot of places over the country through time. And it appears to have been kind of a prototype of the way that this type of thing comes down. And as we begin to study and we was really just learning as we go, but the thing that we saw that began to click after a while is that the perpetrators that were being named by all the children, they were Freemasons. And also the investigators that were investigating the case, they were Freemasons. And after a while, if the things that these children were saying were true, there had to be a guiding hand over the whole affair that was larger, that could be involved in multiple institutions, hospitals, in the police and law enforcement, and in the school system. And we began to see that Freemasonry was just such an organization, and that not only is there the structural capacity for Freemasonry to fill such a bill, but there was also a spiritual element that tied Freemasonry to this whole kind of activity.
Wow. So are there a lot of Freemasons in the state police and judicial system?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So how can any justice ever be served in a situation like this then?
Yeah, it's really tough. And of course, this is done by design. It's extremely, of course, it's obviously difficult when you've got the sheriff and the chief of police and the judge. They all belong to this club. And when they go through the door, they swear a death oath not to tell what goes on inside there. And there's a lot of things these good old boys do that they don't want other people to know about. There was a motel here in town that the shrine would use for parties. And it was well known that they would bring in the hookers, they would bring in the party girls, and they would have their tilers guard the door, so like no one would know what's going on. But, there were pastors, and there were elders, and all kinds of professed Christians that were taking part in this type of thing. And they thought, well, nobody knows, but the Lord knows, and a lot of other people do, because Evansville is not that big a town. And, this is the way it is. There are things that go on, and I know this on you, and all it needs, it's the concept of a lodge within the lodge. And if a group, if I wanted to recruit somebody into the OTO or into Satanism or drug trafficking or illicit arms sales or whatever, all I would have to do is go down to the lodge and feel people out. And if I did try to recruit somebody that didn't like what I was into, that person has sworn a death oath when he come through the door not to say what goes on there. So it's the carnal man's dream. The carnal man's dream to have a place where they can do whatever they want to do and not be held accountable. And all it takes is for somebody to either be an officer of the lodge or to know an officer of the lodge well enough to get the keys to the property to use the lodge on an off night, and there you go. You've got a perfect setup. And it was about the early 90s, I think about 1993, I did a presentation in St. Louis, Missouri that alleged that there was a serious connection between Freemasonry and Satanic Ritual Abuse. And there was a board over this conference, and I had to go before this board. You know, this was a pretty wild accusation, but I had to make my case to them before they would allow me to make the presentation. And there's certainly nothing wrong with that. And I did so. And at that conference, it was the first time that I know of where anybody seriously linked Freemasonry to Satanic Ritual Abuse. And since that time, world over, there is an understanding among ministers and among therapists that there is a very serious connection between Freemasonry and SRA.
How many pastors would you say, would you estimate are Freemasons?
Well, in the Southern Baptist Convention, the figure is about 20%, and in the Methodist, it's about the same, 18 to 20%. But the lock they have on those denominations and others is really phenomenal. When we would do, for years, we did our National Leadership Conference on Ministry to Masons, and almost every year we would have one or two pastors that were dealing with Freemasonry come and tell their story. And many times, I remember one young pastor from Florida that was in the Methodist denomination, and he chose to speak on Freemasonry on a Sunday morning. And before his Wednesday night service, they had come to tell him that he was relieved of his pulpit. And the same thing in the Southern Baptist denomination. I know many, Stoney Shaw, Pierce Dodson, many pastors that have dealt with the issue, and they have paid dearly. And one of the reasons, and well, the primary reason for that is money. In the General Baptist denomination, they have a college down in Nashville, and the Scottish Rite donated a big hunk of money for scholarships. And when these schools accept that, of course, you don't bite the hand that feeds you. And they gave over $250,000 to Baylor University, which is a long-standing bulwark of Freemasonry down there at Baylor. So the price, it's very well known in these denominations and others that if you speak out about Freemasonry, you will pay the price. And beyond that, the influence that Freemasonry has, and I call Freemasonry the F word of the church because they're not going to say it in the pulpit. And it's just a horrific spirit of cowardice that's upon the so-called American church. And one of my heroes, and I tell you, we're living in days where it's getting harder and harder to find heroes, but one of my heroes is Charles Finney. And Charles Finney was involved in what was called the Second Great Awakening that began in about 1830 and ran up. It was really brought to an end pretty much with the Civil War. And Charles Finney was a Freemason and a lawyer, and repented of both, thank God. And he wrote a book on Freemasonry, the character and practical claims of Freemasonry. And in this book, he specifically claims that the reason the Holy Spirit was poured out on the churches of North America was specifically because the churches made Freemasons choose between the lodge of the church. And they flushed the Freemasons out, and it led to revival because it was a purging of idolatry. And all of this was a result in the 1820s of the revelation of the murder of Captain William Morgan, who was the first person to write a book. He wrote a book called Illustrations of Freemasonry. And in this, he was very detailed, revealing with pictures the first 3-degree rituals. And basically, they took him out on Lake Erie. They tied weights on his legs, and they threw him in to see if he could swim. And they murdered him. And one of the fellows that actually threw William Morgan in Lake Erie, he confessed on his deathbed to a minister in Canada. And this began, it was the spark that started the fire that almost eradicated Freemasonry in America. And if it was not for General Albert Pike rebuilding the lodge after the Civil War, Freemasonry looked like it was done for. But unfortunately, under Mr. Pike, it had a revival after the Civil War.
Wow. So we got about 2 minutes before we go to break. Can you summarize brick masons aren't necessarily part of this organization. They're just people who lay bricks, right?
Yeah.
So they're not Freemasonry. What is it as compared to brick masonry?
Well, in 1717, in the Grand Lodge of England, there was formed what was called speculative masonry. And the great cathedrals from the time of Constantine on, when the cathedral builders with the Knights Templar and all of that was called operative masonry. And it was just like, it was like the Union Hall, basically. And what password you could give showed what level of skill you had and what wage scale you should receive. But after 1717, and you can see, and it can also be shown, one of the deceptions of Freemasonry is that it only began in 1717. But after 1717, it was open for people that were not actual laborers to join in speculative masonry. So that's the basic difference between operative and speculative masonry.
Okay.
The Kev Baker Show with Kev and the crew, Monday through Thursday on Truth Frequency Radio.
And we're back on the Revolutionary Radio Project. I am your host, Rob Skiba, and tonight I'm talking with David and Donna Carrico about their ministry dealing with satanic ritual abuse and Freemasonry and things of that nature. And in the previous session there, we heard David's testimony. Now I'd like to hear Donna. Donna, in the intro that I read, you mentioned that you share your testimony about how God has brought you from victim to victor. What's that about?
Well, I had a very troubled childhood, filled with incest, physical and emotional abuse, rape, molestation from both sides of my family, and a troubled marriage, poverty, illness. I had 2 beautiful children in the middle of all that. And at the end of that first marriage, I had a time of promiscuity where I got involved with the wrong people. And I met a witch and 2 Satanists who also abused me. So sometimes, and I think this is the case with everyone, you have to get far enough down that you realize you cannot do it yourself. And you have to call on the Lord to help you. And that's as far down as I was. I had tried to commit suicide twice. Once when I was 15, I took an overdose, and then later in that troubled time at the end of my marriage, I tried to cut my wrists and walk in front of a train, but praise God, He kept me from dying and getting killed. And I'm here today to give hope to those who have went through this troubled time. There is hope. There is healing. And I'm a product of that the Lord can heal a person. And through the years, I've tried to help many other people that have called on us and asked for help to show them that there is hope, and there's nothing that you've ever done that can keep you from the Lord. He will reach out to you if you'll reach out to him. So that is my testimony. And after I did give my heart to the Lord, I met David, who was my Sunday school teacher. And so the Lord put us together, and we've been together for 36 years this last month. So the Lord knows what he's doing if we just let him have our lives.
Well,
so
congratulations on 36 years.
Thank you. And when David met me, he didn't realize how messed up I really was, because I hadn't really dealt with my emotional problems very much. I just pretended for years, as most people do. I just pretended everything was okay, and I had joined this SLAM, like he said, Society's League Against Molestation, to see if I could get some help for myself, and it did help meeting other survivors. And I met a lot of these parents of these children that David spoke of, that where their children had been abused, and I held those children in my arms. I believed their stories. They had terrible abreactions, and I was glad that God would use me to help them. So many times, people are afraid to talk about abuse because they'll be judged by others. I used to get I still get a little upset, I'll be honest here. When you try to tell somebody about abuse, that you're a victim or a survivor of abuse, one of the first questions they'll ask is, well, how old were you? Like, if you were 2 or 3, it wasn't your fault, but if you're 16, then it's your fault after you reach a certain age. And I'll admit that you should know better at ages like that, but sometimes you're so controlled, as I was, and you're so trained to be a victim that you're afraid to speak out. And in my case, when I did tell somebody the truth, he raped me. And when I tried to tell other people the truth, including a Christian, I felt like they were making advances towards me. It's very hard to talk about abuse, but a person that is a survivor of abuse needs to find somebody they can talk to, because that's what abuse does. It makes you keep the big secret. And as long as you're keeping that big secret, and yes, you do need wisdom and who to talk to, but as long as you keep that big secret, then the enemy is getting a foot in the door. So I do feel like people need to share their experiences and try to get help. But this was overwhelming when we saw these kids. It was hard because even though I had been through some satanic ritual abuse, I hadn't been in it as a participant. I was always a victim, and I didn't have that many memories of the abuse, but the memories I have had have been substantiated. But for these children, when they told us, we at first, like David said, we couldn't understand why Freemasonry would be open to this abuse. Now, we want to qualify, of course, not all Freemasons are Satanists, and not all Freemasons are child abusers. Freemasonry brags that they make good men better. But our friend Tom McKinney always said, Freemasonry deceives good men. And that's what we think too. But there are some real connections, and I think David was going to explain some of that too. The why that Freemasonry is connected to abuse, how it could be possibly connected to Satan.
Well, before we go there, I'm part of what I refer to it as a scripture-based self-help program here in Richardson, Texas, that was actually very instrumental in, frankly, saving my life when I was going through a crucible and a very difficult time, divorce. I was broke, homeless, divorced, bankrupt, and ready to put a bullet in my head, living in Dodge Stratus with everything I owned in it back in the end of 2002, and went through this program, and God really used it to quite literally save my life. And then I was headed out to California because I figured I'm already living in my car. I'm halfway to the true Hollywood dream, already. So, but every time I tried to leave the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, it was like I hit a force field, and God was saying, "You're not going anywhere. You're staying here." And I fought it at first, but then I finally said, "Okay, I'll stay." And I ended up plugging into that ministry and becoming a small group facilitator, and then eventually became the vice president and leader of the third and fourth. There were 5 weekends at the time, and I was the leader of the third and fourth weekends. And when I became a facilitator in the small groups, I was literally shocked, because I grew up, I think, in probably a plastic bubble or something up in Massachusetts where I lived, in a Leave It to Beaver neighborhood. Wasn't aware that any of these things happened anywhere except in TV shows and in the movies. But when I was a facilitator of these small groups, month after month after month, I would get these people that would come in and share these horrific stories of this type of abuse. And it made me realize, man, this must be a lot more prevalent than I certainly ever would have imagined before. Is this type of... I know the people that I talked to, a lot of it was associated with military. Was that your experience too? Or was it government and or military that was involved in the type of abuse that you experienced?
No, my father was not a Mason. He was not an alcoholic. He was a hard-working man. I guess you'd say he was just evil, because he didn't have any of those connections. Although I have spoken to several people like you who claim that there was military involvement, and like their families lived on army bases, and we've met several, as a matter of fact. But you mentioned the frequency. Old statistics from several years ago says that a woman, women are abused before the age of 18. There's at least 3 out of 10, and for boys it was 4 out of 10. But I think there's a very higher statistic now, and I am concerned for the girls for today, and the boys as well, because so much of the music that they hear is geared to sexual activity. Plus, a lot of the lyrics say, "You say no, but you mean yes," and I have spoken to several younger girls, and it's like they just assume that they're going to get raped, and it's a part of life. And it's so sad, because that isn't not the way they should be thinking. And I am concerned about this. But it is up to the parents to be setting out foundation for the children at home. And our world has become so money-oriented. I mean, you do have to have money to live. And people have to work so hard, so it makes both members of the family working, and they're not with their children as much as they probably should be. But I am concerned for the children of today. But it is a very high statistic of how many this happens to.
Yeah, well, I mean, incest and rape is certainly horrific and terrible for anybody to have to experience, but when that is mixed in with satanic ritual abuse through secret society and that sort of thing, because, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but that lends itself to multiple identity disorders and D.I.D. and all kinds of other things.
Yes, it does. Multiple personality disorder is usually achieved before the age of 5 years old. That's the time. Although once they start to become formed, what happens is the cults deliberately know how to form these personalities, and they will deliberately help these people to form personalities. But there is hope and there is healing for this. Sometimes, and I'm not saying that God does this all the time. Sometimes it's an instant process, but usually it takes some time. But we've had several survivors that we've helped, and they have become whole. But multiplicity is a safeguard that God kind of allows, because if you can't stand the abuse, you'll just die. Mm-hmm. And multiplicity allows a person to live until they can get help. It's not God's perfect plan or anything, but it's something He has allowed.
Well, because this became more and more prevalent in the program that I'm a part of, we started seeing more and more people. I mean, it's one thing when I was in the foreign mission field and dealing with demon possession, you just cast the thing out. I mean, that's a pretty easy deal, you know. But you can't cast somebody out of themselves, you know.
No.
But some of these people would manifest in, if somebody is not familiar with Satanic Ritual Abuse and D.I.D. and how all that stuff works, they can mistakenly assume that what they're dealing with or what they're looking at, you know, in this person is a demon possession situation, when it may not be. It may just be a multiple acting out in a different...
Well, they're called, the personalities that are strong are usually called inner self-helpers. And they do come out kind of strong because it was their job to help protect the person.
Sure. And
so that is one of their personalities a lot of times. And we, in our experience with this, and we have wrote a little bit about that in our Victim to Victor's book about multiplicity and how it happens. People are born whole soul. They're born with one soul. But if you can kind of just picture this as an example, not the way it is every time, because I've seen many different forms, but like a pie. And if you have a whole pie, that would be a whole soul. But when a person has personalities, the pie would have different slices. And then what can happen is the devil can control one whole slice or several slices, or there can be devils in between those slices. And what we've found in the case of satanic ritual abuse is almost always there are devils involved. And it is hard to determine the difference, but we also have a little chart in our book that helps people determine the difference between a devil and a multiple personality. So,
but you mentioned something that, you know, devils between the slices, and I could see how trauma and this sort of thing can be a doorway to welcome that sort of thing into a person. But this begs the question, and I want to get your take on this: can a Christian be possessed in the sense that you're talking about?
That is always a major question, and I will let David answer that. My own opinion is that they can be really oppressed by devils. And during this time, there's a possibility they could lose their salvation. But it's really hard to... I mean, we had a person that came to us one time and wanted us to baptize each one of her personalities. And David, you better take it from here and talk about that, your opinion about that, too.
It seems strange, but to most people who've never heard of any of this before. I've heard enough of it through doing radio programs and conferences, and, of course, being a part of that organization I was talking about, to see that it's very real, but that, I mean, there really are multiple personalities that are complete individuals of themselves, you know, in a person that has experienced this. And, you know, so when I went to a men's retreat once, and everybody was there that I knew were Christians, and many of them strong Christians that I would have considered people I would look up to. But a pastor came through that was heavily involved in deliverance ministry, and I came to realize that Christians certainly can have hitchhikers. Whether that's possession or not, I don't know. But I saw godly men who were getting set free of bondage that they were involved in various aspects of their life, really almost literally vomiting out demons and getting set free. And for me, growing up a Baptist boy, that was a paradigm shifting. Like, what did I just see here? Because I always thought Christians can't be possessed. But I mean, I guess we're a three-part being, and maybe they can take up residence in different areas. I don't know. But what is your take on all that? Either one of you.
Okay. Well, children of God do not live in bubbles, and we are very capable of opening up doors. Mm-hmm. And whenever we open up doors, we give an avenue for the enemy to afflict us. And when we allow this to go on, things that the Bible calls strongholds can develop. And it's really becomes to be a mute question if the devil is in you, on you, or wherever. We're having problems with the devil and with devils. And in the case of severe abuse, literally the soul splits. And there's scriptures where David talks about the soul being rent asunder, and there are many scriptures in Job that talk about the dividing and the melding of the soul. And literally, this goes to the point where parts of the soul are not aware of what the other does. And it's quite possible, like Donna was saying, for devils to attach to part of the personality that the other is not aware of. And I think that this very much can happen in Christians. And a lot of times, this doesn't even take place so much because of sinful activity. Well, it does, but it's the abuse that it's perpetrated opens up these doors through extreme emotions. And I guess the answer is I believe that I've seen this many times in our ministry also, that very sincere Christians, and well, let's face it, Christians have sin issues, and that's what much of the New Testament is about, how that we deal with our sin problem. And
one of the doors that is always open the most is divination. People don't realize it. Rabbit's feet, 8-ball, wishing on birthday candles is not good either. I mean, we have lists of them in our Victim to Victors book when we're trying to help these people realize what doors they've opened. And we're not like fanatic here. It's just obvious. In Deuteronomy 29:29, it says, the secret things belong to God. Well, divination comes in many, many, many forms. And that is the most prevalent door that's ever opened. I mean, there's a long list, but that's just a few. It isn't even obvious, like palm readers or something like that. There's just many ways. And the thing, what we've seen happen is the devil might come in one door like that, but he exposes himself in a different way. Like somebody might have went to a palm reader. They might have even forgot about it. Happened years ago. But then all of a sudden, they'll become adulterous. So he doesn't always manifest in the same way that he came in. So it's a very tricky thing, but God is in the healing business, so we believe in that. We've seen it over and over.
So how does one begin to resolve the D.I.D. issue, dissociative identity disorder? How do you begin to bring the multiples back together into one whole person?
Well, I have a friend that is a psychiatrist in St. Louis, so I work with her all the time, and I've worked with a lot of survivors, and I have here the truth of this whole matter is that it's very hard for a person with multiplicity to trust people, and so that's one of the first things. If you really think God is calling you to do this, then you really have to have a heart for it and a lot of patience. And I would advise you to get educated on some of the main things to do. But one thing I like to encourage is inner conversations. Like David said, there's a lot of times there's some parts of you that don't know what the other parts are doing. So one of the first things that I feel like God led me to use, I don't even like to call it a method, it's kind of an exploratory thing. I try to get people to just take a piece of paper, a plain white piece of paper, and have some crayons laying there and some ink pens, and of course they should pray if they can, and ask God to help them to draw a picture of what they think they look like on the inside. And then that might reveal a whole lot of things to them they never thought of. And it's not a matter of a thing being right or wrong. Like I said, it's a matter of exploring what you might see or you might hear. And this, of course, should be done with a trusted friend or a caregiver, I would say. But that's one of the things that I would encourage. And then once you see what's in there on that picture, you can begin to discuss it. And something, I mean, I will admit this is probably one of the hardest things for a lot of people to do, but they could try anyway. And then identifying, we call it mapping out the system, where you just sit down and make a list of the names of the parts, what age they are, maybe even possibly who their abusers were, what their job is. And then if you can begin to get inner conversation going, and the way I suggest to do this is you have an inward meeting, and I would get like a kitchen timer. And you see, the reason why a lot of therapy is unsuccessful is because everybody's trying to talk at the same time, and therefore it comes out all mumble jumble, and then you can't understand anybody. So what I suggest to do is to give everybody a few minutes, and you have one personality in charge of the timer, and you set the timer for like 3 minutes, but you allow everybody to talk. And this could take some time if you have lots of personalities, but it's a way to get inner communication. And it's good if you can have these meetings frequently inside. And this is just one of the steps. I mean, multiplicity is a very complicated issue, and it comes in a lot of different forms, but that's just a couple of things. And once you can see who they are, what their jobs were, and then speak to them about healing and how God will help them, and try to teach each one who Jesus is and what he's done for them. And you see, if it's a child personality, you may have to just sing songs with them and let them draw pictures, sing songs about Jesus, so that they can feel that love and that acceptance of Jesus. And then God also allows us, there's other things we can do. We when David and I pray, we often help people. You know, there's a first, second, and third heaven, and in the third heaven is where God's throne is. And we help to teach people how to go to God's throne and how to talk to him there. And there's all kinds of marvelous things that can happen with the Lord. I mean, it's such a big subject, it's hard to truncate it into one section here, but that's just a few things that I've found that actually is very helpful.
Now, how much of these things that you've been talking about and is in your book, Victims to Victors?
Well, we have several chapters, and we deal with issues such as forgiveness. Well, the first thing we deal with, of course, is salvation, because the person needs to understand salvation. They need to understand what they're saved from. A lot of people automatically assume that they're saved from hell, which they are, but it's more than that. When you're saved, that connection that was broke between you and God is no longer severed, and you're able to be with him.
Okay.
Okay.
Wherever you are, make it Truth Frequency Radio.
We're back on the Revolutionary Radio Project. I am your host, Rob Skiba, for the second hour of the broadcast. I'm talking with David and Donna Carrico. about their ministry dealing with Freemasonry and Satanic Ritual Abuse and things of that nature. And right before the break, Donna, you were talking about some of the topics in your book, Victims to Victors, and you were saying that salvation, it's the connection that we have with God is no longer severed through salvation, but salvation is so much more than just fire insurance, right?
Oh, yes, it certainly is. It's so much more. Just relying on the Lord each day of your life, it's all included in salvation. There's so much more, but there's such a misunderstanding about how to achieve salvation. There's some denominations that teach water baptism saves you, and we don't believe that way ourselves. It's a part of the sacraments, and yes, we should probably follow in Jesus' footsteps, but just being water baptized does not save you. It has to be a heart choice. And we explain all this, and we explain some of the questions you should be able to answer if you are saved. We call it the salvation examination. And we also have chapters on closing the doors, spiritual hygiene. In other words, our old friend Bill Schneblin, he used to say, when in doubt, throw it out. If there's something you feel like that's demonic in your home, just instead of question it, just get rid of it. And then we deal with forgiveness. We deal with breaking soul ties. We deal with iniquities, because iniquity and sin is not the same thing. So we fully explain that. We deal with curses, rash vows, how to deal with the SRA and the MPD, how to cast out devils. And then, of course, we include one appendix we have on who we are in Christ. These are affirmative scriptures that a person can read to encourage themselves and read what it says in the Word about who you are when you're in Christ. And we have, other little sections at the back. And as you said earlier, my poems are in there. There's something that happens whenever you are a survivor and you really just think nobody understands. But my poems are written in a very honest and not in what some people would call Christian language. I use very blunt terms because this helps other survivors to understand you're there, that you've been there. You know what you're talking about. You've been through this, and this was my feelings. And God allowed me to use my poetry. Whenever I'd have a memory, I would write a poem, and then I would pray about it and give it to the Lord, and He facilitated my healing that way. And so being able to express yourself, as I said earlier, is very important when you've been abused. So this book, we don't claim that it has all the answers, but like we said, it does help you clean the garbage out of your life. We use it when we do premarital counseling. It's a good book to expose these areas, and we have sample prayers with each part of it, so that and you can do it yourself. You can read it yourself, or you can do it with your minister friend or a good close friend that you don't mind telling your life history with. So, like I said, we don't claim it's perfect, but it's a good tool.
Where can people get this and your other books?
Well, all of the books are available from our ministry. We have planned on making them into ebooks, but I haven't got that accomplished yet. We're just a small ministry with a big God, and so right now they're all available from our ministry. You can order them on our order page from our website, fojcradio.com, and we have a books page that explains what they are, and we ask for love gifts for these books. Because that's the way we have to have it to reproduce them. But we just really, we love doing this work, and we didn't know what road the Lord was going to send us down. This avenue of ritual abuse, satanic ritual abuse, and exposing Freemasonry was like a big snowball that just, we got involved in this. We didn't know, we knew God told us to move to Evansville. We just didn't know why. But there's a couple of indications here on this subject, because between Indianapolis, Indiana, and Evansville, Indiana, is the largest concentration of 33rd degree Masons in the world. If I'm correct on that, right, David?
Yeah, per capita.
Yeah, per capita. So there's a lot of, and they actually nickname Evansville Evil. And we have heard from many survivors and other ministries, they say that Evansville is like the hub of activity. Now, Evansville has a lot of good things to offer too, but we've heard this about many cities. So, the devil is everywhere. He is the prince of the power of the air. So wherever you are, there is a chance that there's this type of abuse going on. And the sad thing is that most Christians aren't prepared to deal with it. So that's what we've tried to do with our books. We've tried to educate people, whether it be about Freemasonry, whether it be about abuse, whether it be about college fraternities. We even have a book that we deal with college fraternities and the secret society on campus, we call it.
Yeah. Are your books also available on Amazon?
No, I'm sorry, they're not. They really are just available through our ministry at this time. And we've, tell you the truth, some of the things we deal with, it's really hard to find a publisher. But
I can help you guys out with that as far as getting self-published, so we can talk about that afterwards.
Okay,
you can reach a much larger audience, I would think. But I had a question. Somebody in the chat room here was wondering, are there certain personalities or physical traits that satanic ritual abusers are drawn to in the children that they target?
Well, that used to go around that it was just like little blonde-headed girls, but I'm not blonde, and I was an adult when they came after me. I was 28 years old, so I don't think there is necessarily a pattern. The thing that draws them a lot of times is spirits. When you have been abused, there is usually spirits around. And then the enemy has spirits, and those spirits are drawn to each other. So I think that's more of than rather having a stereotype person or personality. I would think it's the spirits that really are drawn to each other.
Well, one thing, too, I might add is that a lot of these children were from single-parent homes. They're less likely to pick children that have parents that are paying attention to what the child is doing, obviously. So they're looking for dysfunctional homes and this type of thing, places where it's going to be much less that the parents are going to figure out what's going on. And I think this is something that they do look for obvious reasons.
How dangerous, then, would you say the public school system is for young people?
I would say it's very dangerous. And if you just look at what's being taught in our public schools, it's spiritually dangerous. And with what I've seen go on, I think there's very much a risk. And it's been seen in daycare facilities. Of course, the McMartin case, the McMartin preschool with Ted Gunderson. This has been also a prototype situation. Wherever you have children in abundance, this is a place where these type of people will target. And once they get a foothold, it's a base of operation for them. And that's why in Evansville, this thing was not resolved. There was a piece done by Current Affair, and there was an article in the Chicago Tribune. And beyond that, it was really a lot of stuff here. It was on the front page of the local paper for many times and on the local news, but it never broke out. Had it been the internet as it is now, I think it would have been a much different case. But
we did what we could. At one point, we had been told by a principal in Owensboro, Kentucky, that the children in her school that and got involved with Satanic Ritual Abuse claimed that their information they got came right out of their school library. Well, this really upset us parents here in Indiana, in Evansville. So I, as a parent, went to the school and I decided, hey, I'm going to check this out. At that time, it was just beginning to be where they required you to let the teachers know that you were coming. Well, I did not. I just told my daughter to meet me at the library at a certain time and gave her a note to get her out of class, and went to the library, and I mean randomly, I am serious, just randomly chose 3 books. And one of them talked about a child that he was very proud of himself because he had an incestuous activity that he called a wondrous event in a satanic circle with his grandmother. And there was one that talked about incubus and succubus and their activity, and then another one that talked about Giddy, which was a goddess, or a god that inhabited in this blood ritual. And I was shocked that those, and I just randomly picked those books. So I did protest those. I did go to the school board. I went through that lengthy process of trying to get those books out of the library. And at that time, one of the bigger things that they worried about was the Dungeons and Dragons game. And that was in several of the libraries. Well, hey, that's old hat now. They went far beyond that now. And so I wouldn't doubt that some of that material is still in school libraries. And parents are just not aware that it's there.
Well, it's in the cartoons. It's in
sure.
TV shows. I mean, it's so blatantly in your face now if you're paying attention. I guess that's the problem. Too many people just are not paying attention. I mean, well, you mentioned 2 names or 2 things a minute ago that maybe not everybody's familiar with: incubus and succubus. What do you guys know about that?
Well, these are sexual spirits, sexual devils, and they plague individuals, often with actual sexual intimacy with the devil. And this is a common problem that's dealt with in satanic ritual abuse. It's that there's much more of this type of thing and than would ever want to realize. But it's reality, and this is something that you deal with the cross of Christ. And of course, this is obviously a very embarrassing thing for someone to talk about. But it's something that in our society today, it's very common, and it's something that can be dealt with the cross of Christ. And these are just devils that we cast out in the name of Jesus.
One of our listeners is asking. It says, "Is what David describing in Evansville potentially related to what was going on in the Franklin child abuse scandal in Omaha in the 80s and early 90s?"
Quite similar. The John DeCamp and the Franklin cover-up, there was the prostitutes and the child trafficking for politicians and all kinds of things involved. And sad to say, there's a financial element to this. When you have this type of thing, child pornography, child trafficking, these are all things that go with the package. It's not just, a lot of times, the religious element is attached to it just to make prosecution more difficult. And it's a lot harder to get a conviction when you have a 5-year-old child talking about being molested by Mickey Mouse at a satanic ritual. And the more unbelievable they can make the abuse, the better off they are.
Because they just write it off as a child's fantasy or a bad dream.
Right. Yeah, and that's by design.
We've been told by some children that suffered from this abuse that they were taught how to drug their parents. And while their parents were drugged, the Satanists came in to the home and made a wax mask of the parent's face. Then during the abuse in the satanic rituals, the Satanists or the abusers would put those masks on their face, and the children would think they were being abused by their own parents. Wow. And there's just so many twists to this. And this is what the devil wants. He wants it so unbelievable that people won't believe. I mean, we could tell you some things that make your hair stand on end, some of these things these children have been through. But, I mean, the problem is people don't understand how this can happen. But God, in his infinite wisdom, created mankind with free will. And unfortunately, there are people that do evil. They have chosen to do evil, and there's other people that choose to do good. But God couldn't have a bunch of robots that just, that he forced to say that that they loved him. He had to have people that would make a choice that they would love God. And so that's why, he created mankind with free will to be able to choose. But unfortunately, there's people that choose to do this evil.
You mentioned Mickey Mouse earlier. How involved would you say Disney is in this sort of activity?
Pretty bad.
Well, I don't know if we can draw a direct connection between Disney and
Walt
SRA,
Disney was a Mason.
Well, yeah.
Walt was a Mason, and the occult themes in their cartoons and their movies is overwhelming, and not backmasking, but the hidden images has been well exposed by a lot of people. The stuff, and this type of thing has to be deliberately put in there. And there's also huge ties with the homosexual community to Disney, and just all kinds of bad things there. But as far as saying to be able to draw a direct line between SRA and Disney, I can't say.
You can't go that far, but you can see.
Line is certainly there.
And one thing in that movie, Red Riding Hood, I could not believe it. And one little section of that, when Grandma the wolf is pretending to be Grandma, he leans forward, and on the back of the chair is a Masonic emblem. I saw it with my own eyes, and the professor at Indiana University where I spoke, Hal Popinski, he one of the things he showed his class was the connections between Disney and the occult, and he had the movie Aladdin, and he slowed it down so people could see exactly what was exposed in that Aladdin movie. So there are many people that's exposed the connections of Disney. But like David said, we can't prove that it's totally connected to SRA, but there's...
Yeah. Well, what do you guys think about the all these archways of the Temple of Baal that are being set up? One's supposed to be set up in New York City, another one in Trafalgar Square in London, and I guess thousands of them are slated to be set up all over the world. And as it pertains to this particular month, which, as I understand it, in April, there are a lot of high occult abuse activity and kidnapping and things of that nature that take place in the month of April.
Yeah, I think that this is a definite attempt to open portals. I believe it's just exactly that. People might think that that's a little far out, but
they're making doorways. It's the arch, the doorway, basically, of the temple.
And this was brought from the temple in Palmyra, that they're bringing this arch, and ISIS has just been driven from Palmyra. And I don't know if they're even driven completely out. And what made me wonder, they must have cut some kind of deal with ISIS to get that thing over there that quick. How in the world did they do that? Before hardly ISIS is out of the town, they got this thing on the way to New York City. So I don't know how that come about. But this whole thing, and they've already got the obelisk from Egypt there in New York City. And, I believe this is exactly what it is. And the whole issue of Freemasonry, they gladly owned Nimrod to be their first Grand Master. And I didn't know anything about your ministry either before Mr. Pounders brought us together, but I found out a little bit about you, and I know that this is something that you would be very much aware of, that Nimrod, being one of the mighty men, which in Genesis chapter 6 and 4 come from the fallen angels coming down and cohabiting with human women, that at some point in time he became a Nephilim through some kind of genetic engineering, or we don't know what, but he became a Nephilim at some point in time. And I think that with the teaching of Tom Horn and many others, that it's now, many people are very aware that the Tower of Babel was actually an attempt to go through doors and portals. And this is very much a part of this Masonic understanding that they see Freemasonry and Masonic initiation as bringing the person into godhood. There are quotes we've got in our handbook on Masonic initiation where the goal is to make the Freemason no longer an ordinary man, but a divinized man. And of course, the final goal of the New World Order is for this evolved Master Mason to put the capstone on the pyramid. And this will be the beast of Revelation 13, who will be the final topping on this Masonic dream of a New World Order. And it's the whole idea of Freemasonry and of Satanism lends itself to this very idea of opening portals. And of course, what better place to do it than right there in New York City, where the groundwork of the New World Order is being laid. And who knows but what they might be very intending to bring the beast through the gate for this very purpose.
It's crazy. It's like we're watching a Ghostbusters movie being set up.
Yeah, you can't make this stuff up, you know.
It is. It's crazy. And I'm sure you've dealt with this, but I'll go ahead and ask you, what your take is on our founding fathers and things like the apotheosis of George Washington and our capital city and the various iconography and stuff that's laid out in our government.
Yeah, well, I don't believe myself that America was ever a Christian nation. The speech that George Washington gave on the floor of the Senate after the invasion, they dealt with the Muslims, and it founded our Marine Corps by sending the Marines over to Northern Africa. He made the statement very clearly that America never was nor ever has been a Christian nation, and nobody raised a bit of protest to that. And I think if we go back to the Pilgrims, that we can talk before 1776, I believe we can talk about a Christian America then. And America was founded by a combination of Christian and Masonic and Illuminist philosophies. And this, and I you're probably aware of Christian Pinto. And I believe that he has a very good take. I believe with his assessment of early American history, I would be in that camp, being right on with that.
Now, for the listeners that may not be familiar, if you guys listening will just go online and Google Chris Pinto, and you can probably start with The Hidden Faith of Our Founding Fathers. It's a really good one regarding what we just talked about, but also The New Atlantis and Riddles in Stone and Eye of the Phoenix are all excellent documentaries.
I think those are pure gold. He's done some really, really excellent work. We recommend those all the time. Really good stuff.
Yeah, it's for me, I was third generation Army guy myself, and in the Boy Scouts, and as patriotic as they come, rah, and had been sucking on the blue pill Kool-Aid, Christian nation, blah, blah, blah. But after taking the red pill and taking a walk through Washington, D.C. for just 5 hours, that's all I had after I took the red pill. I was visiting my sister who lives in Virginia, and we decided to go over to D.C. And wow, I mean, I'd been there many, many, many times growing up in New England, field trips down to Washington, D.C. and stuff like that. And I never saw anything, even though I was looking right at it. But after becoming aware of this stuff and then going there and looking around with intent, it is literally everywhere. That this is a thoroughly occult, Freemasonic, Luciferian-run country.
Yeah, I could not agree more. And when you look at the architecture of Washington, D.C., and of all the cities, one interesting thing that reoccurs throughout Scripture, in Genesis 14, you had the pentathlon of the 5 kings that were coalesced around the Nephilim. and the giants. We see this again in the days of David, the 5 cities of Gaza. That was, of course, one of these was Gath, where Goliath was. And on the east coast of the United States, we have these 5 cities that are in alignment. You've got D.C., Baltimore, Philadelphia, New York, and I'm leaving one out. Oh, well, anyway, there's 5 of them. Help me out, Donna. What one am I forgetting? D.C., Baltimore, Philadelphia, New York. And
Sorry.
I don't know. I'm like Rick Perry. I can't remember the other one. But anyway, right. Anyway, I believe that this is the same pentathlon around this Nephilim activity. And if you look at the Statue of Liberty, which was a gift to us from Freemasons, if you look at the face...
Hold that thought.
Revolutionary Radio with Rob Skiba. Thursdays on Truth Frequency Radio.
And we're back on the Revolutionary Radio Project. I am your host, Rob Skiba, for the final half-hour segment of the broadcast. I'm talking with David and Donna Carrico. And right before the break, David, you were starting to say something about the Statue of Liberty.
Yes, and the 5. I remembered the other city. The 5 cities would be Washington, D.C., New York, Baltimore, Philadelphia, and Boston. I just despise the Red Sox so much, I suppressed that. But
so speaking of that, Troy King is one of my friends on Facebook. He posted a graphic during the break showing a line going through those 5 cities. But if you keep that line going across the map, you cross over Stonehenge, Troy, and Baalbek. That same line.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and L.A. Marzulli talked about that in one of his books. And he was using the documentation from an episode on the History Channel where they did this. And, it's a definite alignment. And, it's just there. And the occult, you could do 50 shows about the occult architecture in these cities. And I mean, to talk about a Christian origin, and you mentioned the apotheosis of George Washington, just unbelievable. And when you look at the Statue of Liberty, and this is borne out by the study of the intent of it, the face was that of the Colossus of Rhodes, which was male. And you've got male and female body parts. And of course, this is what the Baphomet is all about, which is the high icon of Satanism and witchcraft, which was drawn by Eliphas Levi, a French Freemason from the 18th century who created the Baphomet. And this goes back to this genetic confusion that is, and this transgender idea. And there in New York, there is the Masonic Medical Research Laboratory that is one of the leaders in stem cell research, molecular genetics, and they are on the very cutting edge of this, which makes me extremely nervous. So it's all right there. And the fact that this is the headquarters of the UN and the New World Order, I don't think this is coincidence. And a lot of people, they believe that the beast is going to rise out of the European Union. And my take is he's coming right here. He's going to be, I believe that the Beast of Revelation 13 will be one of the presidents of the United States, and I believe the false prophet will be one of the popes. And in the peculiar alignment, Tom Horn brought this out admirably well by showing the comparison. If you just look at the Vatican and the American Capitol, you can see the obvious similarities. And of course, there at the Vatican, you've got the obelisk from Egypt, there the phallus in the womb, and of course in Washington, D.C., you've got the reflecting pool, and you've got the Washington Monument. So these things are specifically laid out this way for a cult by occultists and Freemasons, and it's for the specific purpose of opening gates and increasing their spiritual energy.
Yeah. And you said why is this happening? Well, it really, if you in the Bible, in the first chapter of Romans, it speaks of some of the same things that are going on today, and it says in verse 28, the first chapter of Romans, they didn't like to retain God in their knowledge, and God gave them over to a reprobate mind. And then on down a little farther, in verse 30, it says they're backbiters, haters of God, despiteful, proud, boasters, inventors of evil things, disobedient to parents. So it's all right there. That's why it's happening.
I've come to believe that there may be two legs of Freemasonry, in the sense that there may be, correct me if I'm wrong, this is just something I've been kind of tooling around in my head, that there in the early levels, the lower levels, is like a recruiting base. And I think some people get involved because they just think, the Shriners and whatnot get to ride a little doom buggy and wear the funny hat and do good and help kids, and it's just a good old boys club. That each level that they have to go through is a test to see, are they going to cause trouble? Are they, what are they inclined? How are they inclined to respond? And if they're inclined to respond one way, then they just go down this one leg and they think it's a good old boys club, and they will fight you tooth and nail. There's nothing wrong with Freemasonry. And then there's the other group that the further up you go, you realize this is absolutely a Luciferian organization, no questions, and they're the ones that know the real secret of what's going on. Is that even close to anything that you've found to be true or not?
Yeah, that's pretty close. And Albert Pike, in Morals and Dogma, he made a statement to the effect that the blue degrees are the outer porch or the portico of Freemasonry, and that would be the entered apprentice, the fellow craft, and the master mason, called Blue Lodge Freemasonry. And he said that Blue Lodge Freemason is not intended to know the secrets of Freemasonry. Mm-hmm. And it's just like Donna alluded to what Tom McKinney would say, that Freemasonry deceives good men. And of course, that is the support group for all of the other things that go on at higher levels. And at the third degree, when you're raised to the degree of Master Mason, they give you a little speech, something like this. They say, well, you think you know about Freemasonry. Well, you don't really know nothing. If you're going to really understand Freemasonry, you've got to study the symbolism of the deeper meaning, and they leave it like that. And most Freemasons will never pursue, but some do. And there's a quote that we use often by Anton LaVey, that he said that every serious occult order goes right back to the lodge, and this is true. There is no serious occult order or false religion, for that matter, that does not have its roots in the lodge.
So somebody in the chat room was asking, if someone was a lower level Mason and they've come to understand that they shouldn't be involved in Freemasonry anymore, are they still spiritually bound to the oaths that they've made?
Through Christ, those things can be broken. One of the reasons that there is such an association between sexual sin and predatory sexual sin in Freemasonry is because every symbol in Blue Lodge can be interpreted sexually. We were going to write a book one time called The Sexual Teachings of Freemasonry, and it's just not writable. There's just no way that you can even write it. It's that perverse.
But we did do a video called Most Evil,
right.
So we do have a DVD called The Most Evil.
One example is that in the Blue Lodge, there's a Bible above the point within the circle in every lodge, and the point within the circle by Mackey is specifically symbolizes the male and female genitalia, and it just goes from there. So there's a spirit that you cannot do, and by its own admission, Freemasonry are the mystery rituals of Babylon and Egypt, and you cannot do these things without coming under the influence of these sexual spirits. And through Christ, and the cross of Christ, just by simple repentance and faith, these things can be broken, absolutely. But
they have to know or understand that they need to be, right? I mean, some of these guys probably think, well, I just left, I didn't think it was for me. But, I mean, there's a real need to be delivered of the oaths that they took.
Oh, yeah. And because of its idolatrous nature, there's a generational effect through Freemasonry. There's, right in Exodus 20, it talks about the curse of idolatry coming down through generations. So absolutely, when a Freemason sees the need to repent and come out of Freemasonry, should definitely pray about breaking that curse and pray for deliverance from these spirits that attach through these rituals. Because even at its most innocent level, and the reason why no Christian should be involved in Freemasonry is that Freemasonry worships another God and Freemasonry preaches another gospel. And both of these things carry a very heavy penalty from God. So there is definitely forgiveness and redemption through the cross of Christ, but the Holy Spirit doesn't operate like an automatic transmission. We need to deal with these things and accept the freedom that the cross gives us, because there is victory in Christ over these things, and we have seen many Freemasons come out of the lodge and be set free.
Have you ever heard of the ministry of Paul and Donna Cox?
I'm not familiar with the name, no.
They've got a ministry called Aslan's Place, a ministry dealing with deliverance from all the things we're talking about here. When I first published my book, Babylon Rising and the First Shall Be Last, I dealt with a lot of the things we're talking about here in this book. And I was talking about it at a conference once, and part of what I was saying in my lecture were some of the incantations that were in the pyramid texts of Egypt, in the Book of the Dead and whatnot, talking about the resurrection of Osiris. Mm-hmm. And this person pulled me aside afterwards and said, you might not want to say those things, write about it, show it, or whatever, to show that it's there and make people aware of it about what's going on. But speaking them aloud, you might want to rethink that, And I'm like, okay, but then as I started talking with them and started seeing where they were coming from with it, I'm like, because our words have power. And when we speak these things out, the universe was spoken into existence. So, we're made in the likeness of God. So there is power in our words. And they turned me on to this ministry, and I asked them if I could have permission to post the prayers of deliverance, because they have actually written out a prayer of deliverance for every stage of Freemasonry, to break each oath that they take in the various levels. And it's pretty serious stuff. And like you said, it carries on to generations. So, if great grandpa or whatever was a high level Freemason stuff, there may be lots of stuff that need to be, even if dad wasn't even in the Freemasons, stuff may still need to be broken off generational, because it goes down to the third and fourth generation.
Yeah, absolutely. And in our book, we didn't call it the Egyptian Masonic Satanic Connection because that was a appealing title. But
yeah,
we researched the Egyptian Book of the Dead, and we document in here where these children from here in Evansville and around the country, they were talking about specific rituals from the Egyptian Book of the Dead. Mm-hmm. And Freemasonry itself claims to be based upon the mystery rites of Egypt, with Hiram Abiff really being Freemasonry. And in the third degree, every Freemason plays the part of Hiram Abiff. They go through a mock death and resurrection, raised from the death by the strong grip of the lion's paw, the worshipful master. And this is an imitation of the dying god of the mysteries. He was known with Nimrod, Osiris, Bacchus, Apollo, Adonis, and in Masonry, the dying god is Hiram Abiff. And this will be the beast of Revelation 13, I believe very strongly, and I could talk a lot about that, but the false prophet will cause the world to worship the first beast of Revelation 13 as God, and this is the God that he will claim to be. He will claim to be the final manifestation of the God of the mysteries, the final capstone upon the Masonic evolution of the deity of man, which I believe is going to include, and this is something Donna can talk about, but she received a revelation. Boy, this goes back years ago.
June in 2001.
2001, and that the final worship of the false prophet will be a false communion. And I personally believe that the reason why there's no forgiveness for, and I'd like to hear your take on this, I think it's probably right down your alley, but I believe that this false communion will genetically alter the individuals that take it to where they will no longer be human. Yeah, and this is why it will be an unforgivable sin.
Yes. Yeah, I believe, that this Antichrist is in fact an antithesis. We have our salvation through the blood of Christ. The precious shed blood of a lamb is what paid for our salvation. So it makes sense to me that there would be an antithesis of that offered, and that it will be dealing with the beast's blood, and that it will be in fact a genetic marker issue that will change you such that you are no longer redeemable afterwards.
That's what our book that we wrote, The Luciferian Transmutation, explains my experience with what the Lord showed me, and through Scripture and through Masonic materials. We don't have enough time here to go into that, but the Lord showed me that there was going to be a false communion, of course, presented by the false prophet, who will probably be a pope, and that it will be offered as probably a one-time thing for immortality, and it's not going to be just the blood of Christ. It'll be offered to all kinds of religions, and it's going to be like a one-time cure. And we feel like there will be influence and tampering, of course, with the articles that are offered in the communion. Maybe possibly some Nephilim DNA stuck in there, or something like that, that will, if anyone will partake in it. And we document this in the book, that the Christians have become, I don't know, they've depended on the communion for more things. Like I said, it's too big a subject even to begin to go into here on this, but we did write a whole book about it to help people to understand. God told me to warn people. I've been trying to do that ever since the Lord showed me that. And just, I want to say one little thing here about deliverance, and when people are trying to help a person that comes out of a cult being delivered, oftentimes they will put them in the middle of a circle when they do prayer. Please don't do that. That's wrong, 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 because that is the point within a circle in Masonic terms, and that's not a good way to offer deliverance to a survivor that's already been through that in a satanic ritual. So I just wanted to throw that in there. But
well, yeah, because you'd be triggering some things in them.
Right.
they're not going to receive anything if their brain's going crazy with flashbacks and whatever.
Exactly.
Wow. So, but speaking of that, now going back to some of our earlier conversation, are DID victims actually consciously aware of how many personalities that they have?
Not always. Sometimes they are. And like I said, it's a matter of trust working with someone that can help them discover those too a lot of times. I've met both kinds. And there's a book written by James Friesen, and he classified some of it as a non-amnesic dissociate. In other words, there was different kinds of dissociation, different levels. Some people are aware, and some people are not aware. And it would take... I can usually pick up on it when I'm around people or when I hear them on the phone. I actually hear them change their voices, or... one time I was even on the internet, and I was dealing with a person with instant message, and they actually changed their font every time their personality would change. Their font would change. Yes, that was a really new experience for me as well. But
and there was one lady comes to my mind that her abuse took place at such a young age that she had no idea what it was not to be a multiple. In her mind, she thought everybody was a multiple.
Everybody was.
Yeah, and she would have, like, when she drove her car, she had to have the driver come out, and it was such a coping mechanism that and this is always one of the big things in ministry, is for the person to believe that it's God's will for them to be whole. And when the person really believes that, because it's survival for them, it's how they live, and a lot of them that were abused at a young age. This one would call the other people singletons, the singletons, and that they have nothing else to relate to.
And I call what happens there, I did a little tape on this, I call it environmental fusion. In other words, the personalities fuse with their environment. Like one personality would take the abuse from Uncle so-and-so, and another one might take the abuse from cousin so-and-so. And then, like, they have different jobs. Like David was saying, one might do the speaking, one might go to church, others don't go to church. They really are there, but they are not aware that they're there. And they just have different jobs. It's, like I said, it's a very intricate subject that... takes a lot of patience to deal with,
and to try to, and it's hard to wrap your mind around this. It really is. But just like in the case of a Christian, we all have doubts and we all have fears. And in the case of someone that experiences DID, all of that doubt and all of that fear can be compartmentalized into like one personality. And what you actually do is you minister to the individual personalities, and you lead those individual personalities to the Lord. And the person, and it's just like you could have a person that is a Christian and even a strong Christian, but yet they have those doubts. And in the same way, you can have a Christian that has compartmentalized, but a lot of these pieces of the personality even have devils attached to it because of the split and the confusion that's taken place.
But we always say whatever the devil's done, God can undo.
Amen.
Right, David?
Absolutely. And there's no... You can't say, like we've given some guidelines in our book, and we've read a lot of others, but you have to rely on the leading of the Holy Spirit.
Yes.
Every case is different, and a lot of this, a lot of the cults know how to split people. And this goes back to Timothy Leary, back when he was doing research in the late 50s and early 60s with LSD in the Massachusetts penal institution, and he wrote a lot of the basic concepts of how to split a person with drugs, fear, and sex. And it's always the near-death experience, which is the basis of all initiation, the music, the fear, the sex. These are all the same elements that are used to imprint and break down the personality. And there's a lot of these cults that are very sophisticated, and they know how to do it. And there's a natural breakdown through trauma, and there's intentional breakdown. So it's just a very complex situation that is nonetheless very winnable with the Lord. So
yeah, that's an excellent note to end on. You know, there's nothing that he can't fix. So
that's exactly right. And there is definitely hope and victory in the cross of Christ. We have seen some amazing deliverances, absolutely amazing.
Fantastic. So we got about 2.5 minutes left of the broadcast. We're going to be in Evansville doing a conference, the Exposing the Darkness Conference, May 7th and 8th. And what are you going to be speaking on there?
Well, I'm going to plead the fifth. If I would tell everyone what I was going to talk on, they probably wouldn't let me speak. And as I said, I didn't know about you until John introduced you to us. And I know one thing about you is that you're not afraid to take controversial positions. And I am going to be doing one such thing at the conference. I am going to be challenging people's biblical understanding of basically the structure of the dark side of the Satanic Kingdom. And I think it's going to be a very, very good thing that's going to make us think about a lot of things. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people that are going to want to know about the Blue House case and the things that went on there. But that's basically what I'm going to do. What are you going to do?
Well, you know, I've been bouncing back and forth on what I'm going to present, but when this whole altars of Baal thing started making the rounds, that all this is happening, I'm going, okay, I think I have a pretty good idea what I'm going to talk about, and dealing with Nimrod and who he was, and I believe will be, perhaps in the not too distant future. So I have a feeling that between whatever you're going to be talking about, and Gary Wayne's going to be there talking about similar stuff, and I guess John probably maybe talking about some things. Who else is going to be there? Did I miss somebody?
Vigilant Christian.
Oh, yeah, Vigilant Christian. Yeah.
Who is a very, very impressive young man, very young fellow. I don't think he's under 25 years of age, from Canada. Extremely sharp. We listened to some things he did. Very impressive young man. Yeah.
Well, so if you guys are in the area, please come see us in Evansville. The Exposing the Darkness Conference. I'll try to put details in the description here. Hey, David, Donna, thank you guys so much for coming on to the Revolutionary Radio Project.
Oh, well, thank you.
Thank you so much for having us on. Be looking forward to meet you face to face.
Likewise. Good night, everybody.
Good night.